Okay. So now, since we're finished with the delegations, let's go on to new business. And we have number one, the 84th Avenue Multimodal Project Update. So is that you Scott, to introduce it, or?
Yeah, I'll introduce it quickly. I think Jason Colnut is our manager of design and construction and engineering department. So Jason will lead off the presentation and his team. So Jason's on here, and so is Victor, and I will now turn off and hand it over to them.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Jason Colnut. I'm the manager of design and construction here for the city of Surrey, and I'll be my team is leading the development of the 84th Avenue project, specifically the segment from King George to 140th, and here today to present an overview of the project, a few reasons behind it, and a bit of a walkthrough of the alignment itself, as well as the kind of the planned progress, schedule update, etc. So Victor Jingan, who is our senior project manager within the design and construction division, has the task of leading this assignment, and so he's going to present here. So I'll let him walk through the slides, and then hopefully we can get some feedback from yourselves. So with that said, I'll pass it on to Victor.
Perfect. Thank you, Jason, and thank you, Madam Chair and the committee, for the opportunity to provide an update on the 84th Avenue Corridor project. So Mayor and Council recently asked staff to move forward with the field investigations and public engagement in order to develop the preliminary designs for the 84th Avenue corridor between King George Boulevard and 140th Street. So what I'd like to do this evening is provide an overview of the overall 84th Avenue corridor improvements that are planned over the next 5 years. I'll spend some time going over the rationale for why the city is making investments along the 84th Avenue corridor and the benefits of the 84th Avenue corridor improvements. I'll then provide an overview of the alignment of 84th Avenue, specifically between King George Boulevard and 140th Street, and then discuss the work we're undertaking that will help shape the preliminary designs for the project. So over the next 5 years, there's a number of transportation improvements planned along 84th Avenue between 120th Street to 160th Street. So we have multimodal improvements planned between Scott Road to 124th Street, as well as between 152nd Street to Fraser Highway, basically involving cycling and pedestrian improvements. We also plan to complete the missing road segments that are shown in red here along 84th Avenue, which are between 124th Street to 128th Street and King George Boulevard to 140th Street. So collectively, these improvements will provide an alternative multimodal east-west corridor between Newton and Fleetwood, and will integrate with the existing transit services with the R1 rapid bus along King George Boulevard, the upcoming R6 rapid bus along Scott Road, as well as the Surrey Langley SkyTrain along Fraser Highway. So here's why 84th Avenue was selected to improve connectivity between Newton and Fleetwood. So between 2000 to 2009, the city explored a number of options to improve road safety, alleviate traffic congestion, and provide increased connectivity between Newton and Fleetwood. These options, we evaluated a number of options that looked at making improvements on 88th Avenue by either 6-laning 88th Avenue from Scott Road to Fraser Highway. We looked at providing a grade separated interchange or a large roundabout at the 88th Avenue and King George Boulevard intersection, as well as we looked at connecting 80th Avenue between 152nd Street or King George Boulevard to 152nd Street, as well as 84th Avenue between King George Boulevard and 140th Street. So the extension of 84th Avenue was the recommended alternative, as it was the most economical solution with the estimated cost of $13 million. And it also provided the best balance from a traffic, safety, park, and environmental standpoint, and overall provided the best connectivity between the two communities. So if we look at the options from an environmental lens, 84th Avenue has the lowest number of creek crossings. So if you look at the yellow circles in the images below, it indicates the number of creek crossings required for each option. So the 80th Avenue interchange option would require 3 road crossings across Quibble and Bear Creek. And then the 80th Avenue corridor would require at least 7 creek crossings across Hunt Creek, Bear Creek, and Enver Creek. And then we have the 84th Avenue corridor between King George and 140th Street that would require the 2 creek crossings across Bear Creek and King Creek. So there also are a number of benefits expected from the 84th Avenue project, from improved road safety, enhanced connectivity and reliability for traveling public between Newton and Fleetwood, and better transportation options for cycling and walking, as well as improved access and amenities within Bear Creek. So going through these benefits in some detail, with respect to improved road safety, it's a key benefit of this project, with the intersection at 88th Avenue, King George Boulevard being the worst rated intersection in Surrey with respect to the severity of collisions. With the connection of the missing segments along 84th Avenue, it will allow us to basically reduce the heavy congestion that is currently existing along 88th Avenue and King George Boulevard specifically, and will allow us to improve the safety at this intersection. So here's some data, collision data gathered from ICBC, and based on this collision data, King George Boulevard and 88th Avenue is the most dangerous intersection in Surrey and the 3rd highest crash location in the Lower Mainland. So every 4 days, there's a person killed or injured at this intersection. And so, with approximately 1,000 people moving to Surrey each month, it's important for us to, make investments along 84th Avenue to ease traffic congestion along 80th Avenue to improve the overall traffic safety. Enhanced connectivity is another benefit, a key benefit for the project. So right now, the city has limited east-west arterial roads, particularly in the central portion of the city, where there are only the 2 continuous arterial roads, 64th Avenue that you see at the bottom of the image, and 88th Avenue, which connects Newton to Fleetwood and Cloverdale. So other east-west arterial roads, such as 72 Avenue, currently terminates at the agricultural land reserve boundary along 152 Street, or remain unconstructed due to alignment crossing significant environmentally sensitive areas such as 80th Avenue between 140th and 152 Street. So as a result of this gap in east-west corridors, we see basically 88th Avenue is the busiest east-west corridor in the city, with approximately 40,000 vehicles a day using this street. So completing the missing segment along 84th Avenue, the 2 missing segments, will serve to reduce the congestion overall on 88th Avenue, and will provide the much needed east-west corridor connection connecting Newton and Cloverdale and the Fleetwood community. So completing the 84th Avenue improvements will also provide for a safer, separated walking and cycling facility, providing everyone with more healthier travel choices. These improvements along the corridor will provide a more direct east-west cycling route between Newton and Fleetwood, as currently we have about approximately a 5.6 kilometer gap in a continuous and direct cycling corridor between the 2 communities. So the multimodal improvements will be another key benefit as part of this project. Another key benefit of the 84th Avenue project is it aligns with the improvements planned for the Bear Creek Parks Athletic Center. So the Athletic Center project will expand seating capacity from 800 to about 2,200 seats, which will make the Athletic Center capable of hosting international level events. So with the upgrades, there will be a need for increased parking and access for the park. And so early studies suggest that approximately 200 additional parking stalls will be needed. As well as we've seen with the COVID-19 pandemic, generally, and as the city generally continues to grow, there's been an increase in demand for better access and more access to parks, including more trails and paths for walking and cycling. So through the completion of 84th Avenue, we'll be able to provide the increased connectivity to Bear Creek Park through the addition of trails and path connections, as well as adding some parking capacity through the addition of on-street parking. So focusing in on the segment of 84th Avenue between King George and 140th Street, I'd like to spend some time just walking through the 84th road alignment. So currently there's an unopened road allowance for 84th Avenue that was established well over 100 years ago and has been in place prior to the creation of Bear Creek Park. The unopened road allowance is on this map shown in the unshaded area that runs east and west on the north side of the Strata and Church properties that are identified in the blue color here. And basically this east-west 84th Avenue corridor runs from King George Boulevard to 140th Street continuously. So Bear Creek Park was later then created, and the portion of park that's bounded by King George and 140th Street and is on the north side of the unopened 84th Avenue road allowance has a park protection bylaw that was essentially established to ensure the lands north of the unopened 84th Avenue road allowance would remain for park purposes, which also includes facilities such as trails, pathways, and utilities. The land south of the 84th Avenue road allowance is also commonly referred to as Bear Creek Park, though it's not actually formally part of the Bear Creek Park reservation area. This land is basically intended to be used as a passive park and is currently encumbered by the BC Hydro utility right-of-way that is shown in yellow, in the yellow shaded area. So the red line here shows the road alignment for 84th Avenue, which stays outside of the Bear Creek Park reservation area and uses the existing unopened road allowance and right-of-ways that are currently in place, while also trying to stay outside of the existing residential and soil landfills that currently exist out there. So these landfills are shown in the gray areas on the north and south side of the planned road alignment. So just to further illustrate the road alignment, I'll take us through the road alignment starting from 140th Street and working our way west. So in this view, we see the alignment of the roadway looking out towards 140th Street. As you can see, there's an existing area of the 84th Avenue road allowance that is already paved, and we'll be using this existing paved area for the road alignment to minimize tree and vegetation removal as much as we can. This paved area is also currently used for access to the church, and through the completion of the project, the church will continue to have full access off of 84th Avenue as they do today, and none of the road work is within the church property. So as we move further west, we can see where the road will cross King Creek. So the road alignment is basically continuing along the unopened road allowance between the existing BC transmission tower and church that you see on the south side of the road allowance and the Bear Creek Park Reservation towards the north. As we're beneath the hydro corridor, you'll see there's not too many trees within the 84th Avenue road corridor beneath the power lines. Though east of King Creek to the church further towards the top of the image that we see here, there are trees in this area that we will be looking to minimize our impacts on. And here is a look at where the road alignment crosses King Creek, which is relatively a narrow creek. Now, due to the clearing activities by BC Hydro, we can see the area has been quite vulnerable to invasive species such as reed canary grass and Himalayan blackberry. So as part of the road designs, we'll be looking at opportunities, or we'll be looking to cross the creek with a structure that will permit large wildlife and fish passage surrounding the King Creek area. So here we're standing at the midpoint of the road between King George Boulevard and 140th Street, looking west towards King George Boulevard. So the road alignment continues beneath the BC Hydro corridor, and again through the stretch, excuse me, this stretch there is minimal vegetation clearing required as BC Hydro has been actively managing vegetation growth through this area. The gravel path you see here on the south side of the road will be relocated to the north to keep the trail network intact. And here's a view of Bear Creek where the road will cross over, and our plans here is to utilize a clear span bridge so that we can stay outside of the environmentally sensitive areas of Bear Creek. Again, there's not a lot of significant trees on both sides of the bank of Bear Creek as, again, we're underneath the BC Hydro corridor, and the picture that I've got here taken was quite recently, as it shows BC Hydro was actively cutting vegetation and trees in the area beneath their power lines. So this is a picture of the alignment as we approach the King George Boulevard intersection. So similar to the east end of the project, this segment of 84th Avenue is currently paved as the area is used for the Strata Properties access. So currently along the road alignment, we're completing field investigations, which include geotechnical work, environmental site reviews, topographical field surveys, including surveys of bylaw-sized trees measuring the tree diameter, species, and tree health. This field work is important as well as routine as it takes place at the start of a project. And we use this information to help us develop the preliminary designs for the project and to establish the environmental impacts and mitigation options. So the field investigation work has been ongoing, and we're expecting to wrap up our field work by the end of this week. Specifically, as part of our environmental investigations, we're undertaking aquatic and terrestrial habitat assessments, including species at risk assessments. We're looking at contaminated soils analysis as the area used to be a historic landfill. There's hydrogeological investigations being undertaken to prevent any groundwater impacts as needed. And so these environmental studies will basically help us make sure that all the potential effects of the road corridor are well understood and are appropriately addressed as part of the project designs. So while these field investigation works continue, the work is under the supervision and guidance of environmental professionals, and soil disruption is being kept to a minimal, as well as we're keeping the investigative work outside of any sensitive riparian areas surrounding the Bear Creek and King Creek areas. So once we establish the environmental impacts and mitigation options, our plan is to seek all the regulatory permits that are required to fully mitigate our impacts to the satisfaction of the regulatory bodies before we start any work in any environmentally sensitive areas. And for those of you who are interested, the field information and reports that are generated will be posted online on the city's project webpage as part of our public engagement process and information sharing. So with respect to the public engagement, we've started our public engagement efforts with stakeholders such as Surrey Environmental Partners, White Rock, and Surrey Naturalist Society, ICBC. We've been in touch with Hub Cycling, BC Hydro, Ministry of Environment, as well as we've had meetings with the adjacent strata property located along King George Boulevard, as well as the 3 religious facilities along 140th Street. So we're also finalizing public mailouts and survey questions, which is planned to go out later towards the end of this month, and we'll be commencing our engagement efforts with the broader public to seek feedback on the road design. As mentioned just before, the project webpage has also been created on our city website, and we are regularly updating it with information as the project progresses. And it's the best place to stay tuned in to keep up to date with project information as we progress. So based on our early discussions with key stakeholders on the project, we are receiving constructive feedback, and although certain stakeholders are not supportive of the overall project, we are appreciative of the efforts that they've given to participate in the project to help shape the project in a way that will help us best minimize environmental impacts. So as typical with many projects of this scale, and this many stakeholders, we are seeing interests that are not necessarily aligned across all stakeholders. So it's clear that we'll need to balance the competing interests based on the inputs we get from the stakeholders. So for example, from a multimodal perspective, there is a desire to achieve cycling facilities on both sides of the road that are separated from the road and sidewalk. However, this would of course mean a wider road footprint. And from an environmental lens, there is a desire to obviously minimize the road footprint as much as possible, and to have minimal street lighting to limit impacts to the environment. And then if we look at it from a road safety standpoint, there's a desire to include all road safety measures such as medians to separate opposing traffic from each other, installing curb bulges to reduce speeds and shorten crossing distances for pedestrians. We're looking for separated sidewalks and cycling paths from the roadway, as well as lighting along the entire road corridor. So as part of the public engagement and project designs, we'll be looking at how to best balance these competing interests. And it would be great to hear from the committee your thoughts on how we should prioritize the road design, considering the many interests to balance for this project. So to give an idea, here are a few examples of how we balance competing interests on other capital projects. So on the top left is an example of a road design along 105 Boulevard, which has separated facilities. The sidewalk and the bike path are separate from the road as well as each other. So this is great from a multimodal separated facility standpoint, though this arrangement would result in the widest road footprint. The top right image shows a compromise example of a separated sidewalk and bike path from the road. However, the sidewalk and cycle path are directly adjacent to each other, so this overall minimizes the road footprint. And then on the bottom left is a picture of 100th Avenue fronting Green Timbers Urban Forest, where we included cycling on the south side of the road, but we kept pedestrians access within the park through the network of existing trails that were established. So that helped us minimize the road footprint while still providing the necessary facilities. And the bottom right is also another example along 100th Avenue, along Green Timbers, where there's no cycling or sidewalks along a segment of the road, as we had pedestrians and cyclists utilize the existing paths and trail network that was already in the area. So this obviously would result in the smallest road footprint. Here's a few examples of street lighting that that we have used in the past. So to the left, we have our standard lighting, which is typically a 9-meter tall pole, which is, although great for lighting the roadway and paths, it will create light intrusion into the neighboring environment. In the middle is an example of a pathway lighting that, although doesn't light up the entire roadway, it does provide adequate lighting to the pathways while minimizing light intrusion into the neighboring environment. To the far right is basically a low-level wayfinding lighting that doesn't provide any meaningful illumination for the road or the pathway, but it does serve to provide guidance for where the pathway is, and of course also has the most minimal lighting intrusion into the park. Another example, here's examples of different medians that we've used on past projects. So to the left is our standard median that is typically over 3 meters wide and has plantings within it. Next, we have a picture in the middle here of a narrow median in areas where we want to provide a balance between road safety and having separated traffic, or a barrier that separates traffic from each other, while also minimizing the overall road footprint of the road. And then to the far right is an example where we have no median protecting opposing traffic lanes. So obviously not great from a road safety standpoint, but from a road footprint standpoint, it is the most narrowest cross section. So as Bear Creek Park is part of the city's biodiversity conservation strategy, we will be considering the following key environmental design features as part of our project designs to minimize our impact. So we do plan to develop a context-sensitive design that avoids disturbing the historic landfills that were decommissioned in the 1970s. We do commit to achieving no net loss of aquatic habitat, and provide compensation as required and to the satisfaction of the regulators. We're looking for minimal street lighting that assures safety. So putting street lighting, for example, possibly in the intersection locations, while perhaps limiting the lighting within the mid-block segment of the road, so we can limit the spillover of lighting into the vicinity of Bear Creek Park area. As well, we're looking at bioswales to naturally treat road water runoff and maintain drainage patterns. And as we saw in a previous slide, we'll be looking to remove invasive plants, species, and restoring native species along the new road corridor, so specifically the reed canary grass and Himalayan blackberry that we're seeing out there right now. We also plan to incorporate the following approaches when developing the road design options. So first, we'll make sure that the road alignment, of course, avoids impacts to the Bear Creek Park reservation area. We plan to utilize the 84th Avenue unopened road allowance and existing right-of-way areas as much as possible, and we'll have at least 60% of the road alignment beneath the BC Hydro right-of-way and existing paved areas. The road cross-section, we're going to look to keep the road cross-section with one lane in each direction, as it will be a community connection, and the road will also provide on-street parking to benefit the park for the future athletics center. So these features are generally illustrated in the rendering of what 84th Avenue could look like between King George Boulevard and 140th Street. So we've got one lane in each direction, parking on both sides, and some form of a cycling sidewalk facilities on both sides. So in terms of the project schedule and next steps, so we're well underway with our field investigations and have begun our discussions with key stakeholders. We are planning to launch our broader public engagement, as mentioned, towards the end of this month, and we'll ask for feedback on the project design options to try to strike a balance between the various interests on the project. The results of the preliminary design development and feedback from the general public and key stakeholders will be summarized in a corporate report to council, which will take place sometime in June or perhaps late May to determine the next steps for the project. So that concludes my presentation for this evening. So again, thank you to the committee and Madam Chair for the opportunity to present the 84th Avenue project this evening.
Thank you very much. What about any? Okay, Councillor Niagara.
Thank you, Chair. All I want to say is a great project, long overdue. Let's do it. Let's get it done. Thank you.
Good. Okay, thank you, Councillor. How about Stan?
I have a couple points. I'm glad to see that that we're going to these biodiversity corridors and the wildlife corridor, moving underneath the power lines there, and building a bridge over the creeks. I think it's going to be a great thing that for the animals to pass underneath, or so those things are all looked into very well. So I'm happy for that. The property to the south. My question is, the property to the south now, what's going to happen with it? Are we going to have more pathways through those particular areas? Obviously, the public needs more pathways and more, places to walk. I'm just hoping that it. What's the intention there? That's what my question is.
Yeah, so there are a number of conversations going on, and we are working with parks. They're developing a larger strategy for the park, and a part of our public engagement will help to feed into their plan, because it is recognized that there are some areas specifically to the south which could benefit from additional access to allow users to really get the most out of the park. So yeah, that's definitely a direction that we're looking at.
And my other question is the bicycle pathway. I understand that the road has to be at you want to keep it narrow as possible, but I do like the idea of the separation of the sidewalk or the bicycle path, because it also provides you an area where you can plant trees or in between things, or not trees or bushes or along that particular road. So again, if I put my environmentalist hat on, it would be very good for the wildlife corridors if there is trees along there, and it makes more sense if there is a distinction between the two pathways. So my comments, that's
Great.
Yeah, that echoes what a lot of the stakeholders that we've spoken to so far have also echoed as well. So, and again, we'll be looking for feedback from the general public as well for that. But that's definitely something that's been noted by a few other people. So it's a sharp point there.
Good. Excellent. Okay, great. And what about Miles?
Hi, can you hear me? I'm currently out in the field, so I'm just joining on my phone. I don't know if it was in the presentation because I was watching on a tiny screen, but Stanley mentioned it a bit earlier about the wildlife corridors. Given that that park is quite critical to wildlife movements through north part of Surrey, is there actually quote unquote proper wildlife crossings that are going to be installed, or are we just talking about standard culverts for fish crossings as opposed to ungulate, like a deer that would actually be able to pass through some of these?
No, we're definitely looking at the wildlife passage perspective, and as Victor noted, the crossing over Bear Creek, we're looking at a clear span bridge. And Victor, maybe you can mention what the kind of current span is right now with the most recent design.
Yeah, we're looking at about a 40 to 45 meter span across Bear Creek. So definitely it'll be wide enough to maintain wildlife passage for large animals to get across Bear Creek.
And again, that's a point that we've gotten a lot of feedback from stakeholders. So something we're definitely looking to follow through with.
And can you clarify, is it a singular crossing or is there multiple crossings?
There's two crossings. So there's one of Bear Creek and one of King Creek. So the crossing of Bear Creek, as mentioned, is going to be a clear span bridge, and we're looking at options for the crossing of King Creek. So it'll either be a wildlife passable culvert or possibly a structure of some kind.
Okay. And in terms of mitigating the habitat losses, what is the city planning to do to offset that vegetative cover loss and tree canopy loss and potential disturbances long term to those environments?
So right now we're obviously in the investigative stage, and we don't want to make any claims about what we're going to do to compensate for habitat before we know what's at risk. So we're obviously putting considerable effort into making sure we're accounting for any habitat loss and then accounting for it. So as Victor mentioned, those type of reports will be put up online once they're available. And then we'll be looking to develop a plan to come up with a strategy. So that's a point that we can't provide specifics on it right now because we're not sure what we're trading for at this point. So
Thanks. Thank you. Anybody else have a question or comment? No. Okay. I just wanted to ask one. Oh, Councillor Niagara, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question regarding the parking lot on 140th between the two Sikh and Hindu temple. Is that part of the project as well, and it's going to be built at the same time, or what's the plan?
Yeah, so that's something that, again, we've received a very positive feedback from. So it's definitely something that we're looking to integrate into the project. And once again, we're looking for wider public feedback as well. But our preliminary engagement with stakeholders has seen this as a very positive feedback. All three of the temples, as well as park users, have kind of indicated that this is something that's a big win for them. So.
Thank you. I do take my son to soccer at Bear Creek Park about twice a week, and parking is a huge problem there. I mean, once we have this new stadium up, it's going to be even more. So I think we definitely need more parking there. So that'd be great. That's all. Thanks.
We might have to rename Councillor Negra the parking counselor. Many areas of parking he's focused on. Anyhow, that's excellent. Okay, so I just had a question about, you gave this oh, first of all, will you give us a copy of the presentation? Would that get emailed by Chelsea to us? Is that possible?
Yes, and that certainly could be provided, yes.
Okay, perfect. Secondly, will you update this committee again? Oh, hold on. But it's private knowledge, or?
No, it's not private knowledge. Maybe perhaps that could be included as part of the minutes.
Perfect.
Of this, which then can go forward to council as well.
Okay, that'd be perfect. And then will you come back to this committee again, or just to council?
The intent was that we were giving the presentation here, and then moving forward, we do the public engagement and then be coming back to council. So there isn't another presentation, an update scheduled at this time with this committee.
Yeah, I was just thinking, but we could inform some of the questions like about the wildlife and the habitat. If we had updates, we could transmit the message to other like Miles and things like that. But anyhow, okay. And then yeah, that would be great. And then with the congestion, I was writing, each area had 28,000, 23, 40, 30, 27 on that one slide. Once you do this completion, what is your anticipated congestion numbers for this road? Is it going to be 30, 20? Do you have any idea?
Do you want me to take that one because I have the numbers in my head?
Yeah, certainly. I know we've done the transportation study, but I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. Mr. Human Calculator here will certainly be able to give you that information.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. We've done some traffic modeling with this connection through. This segment would have on the order of around 15,000 to 16,000 cars per day, and it would result in a significant reduction off of 88th Avenue.
Okay.
And as you continue west with that other connection as well, as you continue over to Scott Road, the volume remains generally consistent. It's around that 13,000 to 15,000 range. It's important to note that even without this connection, the segment over near Scott Road is already going to get significantly higher regardless of this connection. Okay. So we had done that modeling to assess the traffic impacts closer to Delta.
Okay, because that way then it might, I mean, obviously you know all this, you engineers, but I'm just saying, then it could help us with the road design, because then you can say maybe not as big of a median, but like Stan had said, more of those separated and nicer looking, greener, with the cycling and walking, if that's what we're trying to promote, or whatever we're deciding. But if there's not as much volume, you have more, I think, opportunities that way. So
correct. And it's important to note, sorry, to also add with that is our modeling to do the transportation traffic modeling includes SkyTrain to Langley, Rapid Bus on Scott Road. All of that is built into the transportation model, and it's looking out currently as well as looking out to, I think it was 2035 and beyond.
Okay, I see. Okay, great, thank you. And then Miles, one more comment?
Yeah, sorry, just since there's no further follow-up with the committee, I'm just wondering, in terms of the parking issue, my understanding is that the previous parks manager was quite outspoken against encroachment into the park in previous years. I'm wondering, is there any option of putting in a, going up vertically as opposed to into the park itself in terms of a parkade of sorts, if it's going to be an ongoing issue? Because if this new venue is just going to simply attract more people, what's to stop further encroachment in 10 years of trying to address further parking issues by further encroaching into one of the few green spaces left in the city?
Yes, that's something that we haven't specifically worked or looked at this project in terms of the overall parking strategy for the park. But that's something that certainly that we can bring to Park's attention, as it's something that they are looking at in terms of long-term parking strategy for the growing users of the park, and the other if there's additional facilities being added, et cetera. So that's something that we can definitely bring to them, and they can include that in their overall parking assessments.
Perfect. Okay, and then Suki?
Maybe I missed it during the presentation there. Is there any vertical pathways like bridges so up bicycle fellow could go from one side to the other side of 84th there, or does he have to go to King George or to 140th to go over those trails?
So as in pedestrian crossings of yeah, so there are planned pedestrian crossings, and those will tie into the trail network. So the exact number and location of those isn't completely tied down at this point. We're obviously engaging with stakeholders and the public to figure out what the overall strategy is for the trails and the bike paths, and those will all impact, again, the locations and number of pedestrian crossings. But certainly we're looking at that to maintain connectivity from north to south. So
perfect.
Scott?
And then, Suki, just to add to that, the bridge crossing of Bear Creek will include travel lanes and cycling facilities. And then kind of to Stan's point there, we might narrow with the bike lanes, come closer to the road as you cross the bridge. But then when you get across, we could then taper the bike lanes to be further from the road. So those are all things we're looking at as part of the design.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Stan? No, Stan. Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
I got one question.
Okay, go for it.
And I think the cycling paths, the walking paths, and the bike paths, and all these sorts of things are very important, because what we're seeing during this whole COVID thing, the idea of these parks are getting so congested, and people have to have a way to get to the parks. And if the car is the only way, it's going to be a congested mess along there. You're going to have 15,000 cars. Plus, you're going to have people trying to find parking, and they're going to stop while there's somebody pulling in and out. It's just going to be a disaster. So, to me, you got to make it so that the cars either move up and down, and you have good cycling and pathways, because otherwise, it'll be a mess.
Yeah, that's a spot on assessment right there. We're also, there's consideration for future bus routes along 84 as well to tie transit in. Again, as with SkyTrain as well, there'd be an opportunity to SkyTrain out and then come in from Fraser Highway to the park. So we're definitely looking at, again, the whole multimodal aspect to maximize the park users. Because we 100% acknowledge that if you had enough parking spaces for every user in 100 years to use the park, you wouldn't have much park left. So definitely looking to maximize that. So.
Okay, great. And this is a popular topic, obviously. So Suki, what do you have?
Another question I got for you. I understand that we're going from Scott Road all the way to Fraser Highway, and to get the traffic towards, the SkyTrain station that's going to be, on Fraser Highway. The question I have, has the city looked at where they're going to build a park and ride that's going to be close to a SkyTrain station on Fraser Highway?
So right now, that's obviously, now that the SkyTrain's being extended, it's obviously outside of the scope of this project. But now that SkyTrain's been confirmed going all the way to Langley, TransLink and the ministry are considering options for where they could provide such facilities. Again, when it was terminating at 166, we had certain options that were favored, and now that that's changing, it's going to be reconsidered. So stay tuned.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Suki, if I could add, it's Scott. As part of the Fraser Highway SkyTrain, there will be a station at 166 at our Sport and Leisure, which will have a bit of also a transit exchange, which TransLink's also looking at running buses from South Surrey, say up 168 and into the transit exchange. So there's a lot of work in behind the scenes connecting to the SkyTrain project, let alone the SkyTrain project. So.
I was always wondering, because, if you go down 176 to Fraser Highway where the farm line is, that connects you to Golden Years Bridge and Highway 1 and all those areas. So I thought maybe, it would be in that area.
Like I said, mentioned that they're also looking, TransLink looks at bus connections to go from one area to another, like Carvolth Exchange at 204 might now come here instead of the Braid Street station in New West. So they're looking at all that.
Great. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. That was really helpful for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so I might not get the timekeeping award, but anyhow, let's